For local area coordination, I think the way it is and the way it's structured and the way it is so local, I think it has moved us away from talking about statistics and impact through kind of that aspect. And we're focusing really firmly on the individual experience and how their lives are being positively impacted.
For me, I guess lifting up sort of strategically and building on Sarah's point about this being transformative for individuals, I think it's transformative more broadly in terms of sort of public services or the way in which kind of people receive support in some way, shape or form. So for me, this feels like a really practical expression of that shift to a much more kind of relational based, locally connected based sort of set of public services or set of kind of localized support. I don't want to sort of limit it, I guess, to kind of public services. And I think that feels really important as well.
Being so locally based in a small geographic area, I think it helps reach people that might not, want services or might fall between the gaps of statutory services, but still need some kind of help and some kind of support. And I think what we've noticed in Surrey is actually the type of lasting relationship. It's a very different kind of relationship with a local area coordinator than you would have with a statutory service, for example. It can be really complementary, but I think it allows people to look at their lives in a holistic way. So you're not just looking at it through the lens of one particular service or one particular challenge. And I think in terms of that impact, I think it can be really, really transformative for people. So I think in some of the quotes we've had, it's given me a sense of purpose again. I believe I can achieve things for myself again. It makes me want to get out of bed in the morning. These are really fundamental, transformative impacts on people's lives that might be in quite small ways, but as they build, it builds into something I think really, really transformative for that person.
When we visit places where we're thinking about the role and describe it and bring along some of the current local area coordinators, some of the sort of penny drop moments for people, the things that stand out with it come across really clearly. So I remember at a sort of community event a few weeks ago, someone saying, "What? So they just work here?" Because I probably wouldn't phone that number or speak to someone if I had to do that or go over there. And in that sense, it's really simplistic. And also, I think for people doing the role, when we've either the people in the role or had people phoning to talk about it, and they're like, so you just sort of focus on the relationship and you've got time and there's no limit, exactly like you were saying. So there's no limit on that, and that I don't have to have fixed everything by 5 visits.
It feels like there's something very personal about local area coordination, that people in communities, whether they're people being walked alongside by coordinators or people working in and around communities and other practitioners as well, kind of actually being really positive and really supportive about it. I think that's been something I've noticed kind of personally around people's reactions to local area coordination. It's quite visceral for people. It really kind of impacts them emotionally, I think.
And one of the first things the network, I guess, enabled was hearing direct from other people, sort of, I guess, in our roles, kind of commissioning or trying to set things up or doing a transformation project and whatnot, or get an agreement or a mandate to do this, and also from the people doing the role. And that was so valuable, I think, in part because I always name check him in this one, but because Joe McKayley in York, it always stuck with me. He was giving us some broader tips on our approach to, or some learning and reflections from York on how we were doing our work with communities. And amidst all the great stuff they'd done in York, he was like, local area coordination is the best thing I've commissioned ever. And we were like, oh, that made us sit up and take notice, hearing that from a sort of peer, I suppose, which obviously the network helped facilitate. And because the network's so generous with its time and sharing, I guess we got exposed to that helpfully right at the start.
Just from kind of a practical perspective in terms of onboarding new local area coordinators, particularly our first local area coordinator, you're coming in, you don't have established ways of working, you don't have an established team. And so kind of Nick doing individual coaching sessions, having the network there for peer support really open, kind of inclusive, collaborative. No question was daft enough, you know, and there was always that sense of, I think, of just support kind of from the entire network.
The network, and particularly Nick has kind of said at the start, but kind of keeps us in check and balance, was don't mess with the principles. We've learned that if you do, you don't get the benefits that we want. And if you like, that really simple thing we described about, you know, the time to do the work, the permission to do it, the space to do it, the development around it, I can so see that if we hadn't had that, we would have sort of pushed and pulled it in all kinds of directions out of shape.
Going into what Dan said around kind of really holding us to account around the principles and keeping that as our foundation in terms of our ways of working, but also taking the time. So Nick and the network really taking the time to understand the Surrey context and how we work with partners and what's important for us locally. So I think it was really good that it wasn't one size fits all. It was going, actually, these are the fundamental principles of local area coordination. This is what you need to hold yourselves to account to. But actually, we do need to look at your local context. We need to look at how we build the relationships in the right way, how we land the whole concept of local area coordination in the right way. So actually, it's just not something else to add to a wide range of services. It's something that will have a wider impact and something that will help challenge us, both as an organisation, but as a wider system around those ways of working and how we can expand that reach and maybe challenge ourselves to think differently.
Nick specifically, but I guess the sort of the wider network embodied in this as well, feel like the sort of the embodiment of our own local area coordinator. So what I mean by that is he's been walking alongside us in a way that local area coordinators will walk alongside others. And I think that's felt really refreshing and really different in terms of a kind of an approach. So it's felt very much like a partnership and very invested in terms of wanting to see this work, but work in the way that's right for Surrey, as sort of Sarah says. You know, Nick as an individual is, you know, has many of the traits of a local area coordinator. He's passionate, he's kind, he listens, you know, all of those things which I think are so important, but is able to flex those to the right sort of audience and the right sort of thing. So that's gone from everything from community recruitment, hand-holding, to individual coaching, as has been referenced, all the way through to, you know, conversations with wider partners.
Having that ability to kind of convene people and go, look, colleagues in other areas are doing this. You know, we had the Derby examples around how their integrated health and care really pivoted around local area coordination and right into acute settings and all sorts. It's obviously a much more evolved model there, but that's it. I don't think we can underestimate how much difference sometimes that does to the perception of it, as not as less of a, oh, it's a thing in Surrey that a few people have done. And I think the communities team and the council are into this too. Oh, this is like genuinely, because it is a genuinely impactful part of how we think about neighbourhood health inequalities.
We have absolute evidence now of local area coordinators keeping people out of statutory care services, which is incredible. We hoped we'd get that, but we've got that even at this kind of early stage.
I was prepared for positive impacts for individuals, but I don't think I'd quite understood the positive impact for local areas and local communities. And that's as a result of people kind of using their skills and their gifts in terms of achieving what they wanted to do in their lives. So we've had examples where someone, a local area coordinator, was walking alongside. The one thing she wanted to do was set up an art and crafts club because that's something that gave her joy and helped with her mental health. And she's done that. And then the reach of that group has meant actually that people are attending it and they're talking about other issues.
There's something here about how important has it been for our local area coordinators to amplify voices in our communities that would probably never be heard otherwise, because they're not engaged in statutory services. They're not the kind of the people, you know, out and about shouting in locally, all of those sorts of things. So there's something there about it's really helped us, I think, to bring some of those kind of hidden voices to the core. And importantly, I think in terms of that sort of system change, we've been using the intelligence and the sort of the understanding of the themes and the challenges from the local area coordinators to be brought alongside other intelligence and other kind of sources to create a really powerful story about what are some of the really systemic issues here that we need to be really thoughtful about as a set of partners.
You know, we talk about changing our relationship, being closer to residents, being more responsive, prevention. You can't do it if you don't know people.
Through our leadership group and through our kind of communities board that we run, we always bring the personal stories to the fore. And I think that as a way of being able to tell the story, but also to understand performance in a different kind of way, it has been really impactful.
Another impact has been actually how our local area coordinators are thinking differently about how they are in their own communities. So they've all kind of said, actually, through practicing local area coordination, they're now involved in things in their local areas that they previously wouldn't have been, and they think about things very differently in terms of their impact in their local communities, which has just been lovely. And the other thing to say is we've had a really positive recruitment experience. These roles really speak to people. And actually, even if people have been unsuccessful through the recruitment process for a local area coordinator, we've actually been able to look at comparable skills and actually match people into other roles that we have in the county council. And that's actually been quite successful as well.
Where some of the principles and the processes like community-led recruitment, like thinking about how to kind of create more time for workers on the ground, I feels like those, having the example of local area coordination starts to make us be more confident about exploring those in other contexts. So thinking, oh, where can we do this in another scenario?
The approach has been evaluated till the cows come home. You know, it's delivering amazing results in other areas. Why on earth wouldn't you tap into all of that knowledge and understanding that's already there and kind of on tap?
The support, the encouragement, the fact it's worked elsewhere, the guidance at different points, the experience of what can go wrong, the confidence and assurance it probably gives at outset.
That support that you have wrapped around you, which is completely invaluable, that helps you explore both, you know, kind of the positive impacts and the potential of local area coordination, but also some of the challenges that you will have to navigate to make sure actually that it lands well and it lands in the way it's intended and it delivers the impacts that you're looking for. And you've got to give that considered thought. And I think the network is absolutely there to help you do that in the right way. And I would say prepare to be challenged personally as well. You know, I've worked in local government for more years than I care to admit, and actually it made me reflect on everything from the language I use to, you know, my thinking around, you know, place-based work to, you know, and there's something really, I think, powerful for that. So I think you have to prepare that you will be challenged in a really, really, really positive way too, personally, as an organisation.